Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to talk about nonfiction on music, which is something you've probably heard me mention before in this year's Nonfiction November, as well as previous videos from previous years. I started reading nonfiction books on music a couple of years ago, and I found a lot of joy in reading about it. And so over the years I've been reading a few nonfiction books on music, and today I basically wanted to talk my way through some of those, or most of those. They've all made an impression in various ways and also led me on to pick up other books in this subgenre of nonfiction. So this is going to be a little bit of a recommendations and TBR kind of video. The book, as I said, that got me into this genre is what I'm going to call it, is Gone by Min Kim. Min Kim is a professional violinist, and this is her memoir and basically her life as a professional violinist, her becoming kind of a child prodigy as a violinist, and the sacrifices that her family made in order for her to get certain opportunities to educate herself, to become a performer and musician for a living. I think the thing that comes through very, very strongly in this book is her passion, of course, for the violin, and the way that the violin becomes an extension of herself. It feels like it sort of melts into her identity, and it's difficult for her to even separate. It's difficult for her to separate herself from her violin. The other aspect, of course, is that because it focuses a lot on her professional musician life, it talks in general about the lifestyle of someone who has their job is their passion, and so it becomes an encapsulating experience, and it takes over. It shapes the everyday choices you make. It requires you to make certain sacrifices in order to be able to do certain things, and this type of someone who is an artist as a job and also as their sort of life purpose is the kind of stories that I tend to be very easily gravitating towards. You get that sense of both what she gains from having this very particular life, and the joys and the highs that she experiences thanks to her violin playing, but also the hardships and the sacrifices that comes along with this life. It's a beautiful book, and it's also in connection with the book there is an album that she has recorded with songs to sort of listen along while you're reading it, which I highly recommend. Another early music book that I read is Grand Obsession by Perry Nice. This is a book where the author basically looks for the perfect piano for her. So she is, I can't remember if she's a professional musician or if she is just very devoted to the piano playing. Either way, she's on the lookout for a particular piano instrument that will suit her needs. And as she narrates her search for this piano, she also talks about the production of a piano, from finding the right wood to creating the wood in a particular shape to the tuning of a piano. All of the expertise, all of the craftsmanship that goes into creating and building a piano with creating a particular sound. I think there was just so much that I took away from this book that has really stuck with me. I think in particular because the piano, to me, before reading this book, had always seemed like such a stable instrument that was just kind of firm. Once it had been created, it was done, which of course is not true. This book, I think, showed how much variety exists in the sound of a piano depending on so many different factors, and how many people's knowledge and expertise in craftsmanship goes into creating a very particular sound, much like with the violin, which I'll get back to in a minute. And Also, I think this book showed me how, particularly for a serious musician or someone who does it for a living, how important it is to have the right sound for their particular type of playing. So I think if you're interested in the piano, I highly recommend this book. I feel like in general I gained so much appreciation for this instrument, but also find the instrument building itself as a topic really interesting, because the people involved in creating it are not necessarily players themselves. They have their very particular niche areas where they're knowledgeable. But I just find it fascinating how so many people come together to create this one thing. The violin equivalent of this book is the Violin Makers by Marchese. This is a book I read last year, so it's a much more recent read for me. But it's basically the same topic. It's talking about the construction, building of a violin. This book is also talking about Stradivarius, who was he's kind of a legendary violin maker that is still celebrated as sort of the best of the best in terms of standard of violins. It's legendary, the Stradivarius instruments that still exist and are in good shape. And so it's kind of a biography of him as well, and the meaning of quality when it comes to instruments, and how to judge that, and how quality is something that at least for violins hasn't changed that much over the last few hundred years. That's why the Stradivarius instruments are still so highly valued and worth a lot of money, of course, too. But I think, much like with Grand Obsession, the level of craftsmanship, the way that the tradition behind the instrument making, and how it has been passed on through being apprentices and learning through watching and being sort of a shadow to the people who are very knowledgeable, and them passing on the tradition to the next generation, and how there's a constant sort of pressure to have enough people being interested in doing all of this learning in order to keep this tradition and this this art form alive. This book also, I think, goes into a bit the beauty of the violin's sound, because it talks about the violin sound in connection with the quality discussion and what makes a particular violin better than another for various musicians. And one of the things that I appreciated about this was how Marchese captures what I have always found so compelling with the violin's sound. Then we have a biography. This is Bill Evans by Peter Pettinger. So this is more of a niche book in terms of music nonfiction, because it is a biography of a particular musician, and either you're interested in him or not. Bill Evans is one of my favorite musicians, and so I had sought this book out specifically because I wanted to learn more about his life. It's a perfect example of how reading about music can deepen your love for the music itself. You get the chronology, you get both, of course, Bill Evans' own life and the biography aspect of that, and his struggles with drug addiction, and how that eventually led to his death as well. This author is doing a very close study of Bill Evans' body of work, and because of that there is a lot of interesting parallels that he makes and conclusions that I found to be rewarding to read, and made me gain deeper understanding for some of the music that he had done, and why he was this particular type of musician, or why he played music the way he did, why he created music the way he did. One of the things particularly that stood out to me was this book talks about his classical musician background and how that fed into his form of jazz. It was both a opportunity to listen through all of his body of work and to listen closely and with that particular sort of intention of making connections with his life and with seeing sort of the point of his career that the music was in, but also to hear this other person's views on particular things and sort of compare how I saw it. The last of the read books that I wanted to talk about is Maestros and Their Music by John Mauceri. This is a book about conducting, and I feel like conducting is one of those things that both visible and invisible type of work that they do. Visible in the fact that, of course, they're in the front stage type of position to the orchestra, but of course invisible in the sense that you don't really understand what they're doing unless you know. So this book was enlightening in that respect alone, that getting to know more about the technique of the conducting itself and what they're doing and how it works in connection with the other musicians, and how important it is for the conductor to sort of be on the same wavelength as the orchestra, the other musicians involved. Another aspect of this book, I think, is the less than glamorous life of a classical musician. Even though this book is centrally about conducting and about classical music becomes more central than other types of music, it also talks about other things related to music that I found really interesting and that I took away from this book, particularly the change of how we interpret music through the change of technology, through the change of the source we hear the music from. So live performances versus recordings, and recordings listened through various technologies. One of the points that he makes, I think, is with the times of recording becoming the norm, how a musician is used to having this perfect version of their performance, and how the live performance then becomes an attempt to reach the perfect heights of the recording that is several takes and is finessed with the performance becomes the thing that mimics the recording, not the other way around. And then one book I am currently reading that I mentioned in my Nonfiction November TBR, as well as my currently reading mid-month chat. This is Listen to This by Alex Ross. This is a collection of essays. So Alex Ross talks about many types of genres, many types of music. He talks about specific composers, specific musicians or bands, the purpose of music, music education, recording technology, composing, notation, so many aspects. And I think my favorite essays so far have been the ones on classical music in the earlier parts of the book, as well as some of the more biographical essays. So, for example, the one on Schubert, the one on Radiohead I thought was really interesting. The one on Verdi as well, and through talking about specific composers or musicians, he also talks about the genres that they're part of, and the legacy that they have had in that particular genre. So now I just wanted to show you a few of the books that I have on my shelves that are music books, so basically my music TBR. We have Big Bangs, The Story of 5 Discoveries That Changed Musical History by Howard Goodall, and I think one of the things is notation, so basically the writing of composing. One of them is probably some form of recording, but I feel like this will be a fun and enlightening book as well. I think particularly because it touches on different topics and gives you an introduction to them, and then you can always look for more information on a particular topic if it strikes your fancy. Next we have Play It Again, An Amateur Against the Impossible by Alan Rusbridger. This is about the author attempting to learn the Chopin Ballade No. 1, a piece that inspires dread in many professional pianists in 1 year. And so I assume that this talks about learning the piano and some of the things that he learns along the way, some of the challenges that comes up, and probably I assume he's going to be in contact with and talking with professional pianists along the way. Next we have Temperament, How Music Became the Battleground for the Great Minds of Western Civilization by Stuart, Isacoff. I also have another book by this author that I have ordered but has not arrived yet. The piano is a triumph of utility and sonic beauty. The elegant symmetry of its keyboard is matched by the tuning that underlies it, each pitch being equidistant from the next, as seems only natural. Yet for centuries, musicians, craftsmen, clergymen, politicians, philosophers fought heatedly against equal temperament tuning in engaging the greatest thinkers from Leonardo to Newton. Stuart Isacoff vividly charts this long battle, which culminated in the decisive victory of the piano over the harpsichord and of the new forms of music over the old constraints. So it seems like it's specifically on tuning, which I mentioned with Grand Obsession I found really interesting. This one is a bit of a different take. So this is Your Bearing on Music, Understanding a Human Obsession by Daniel Levitin. This is talking about the psychology aspect of listening to music. Daniel Levitin explains how humans experience music and why it is essential to our lives, which I definitely agree with. The next one is The History of Jazz by Ted Gioia. I remember that Olive from Book Olive recommended this author's other book. This one I actually decided to pick up because of Bones, the TV show, where she is reading this in one of the episodes. But the title is pretty self-explanatory. Jazz is probably my favorite genre when it comes to music. Ted Gioia's History of Jazz has been universally hailed as a classic, acclaimed by jazz critics and fans around the world. Now Gioia brings his magnificent work completely up to date, drawing on the latest research and revisiting virtually every aspect of the music, past and present. Gioia tells the story of jazz as it has never been told before in a book that brilliantly portrays the legendary jazz players, the breakthrough styles, and the world in which it evolved. So it seems like it's fairly a wide encompassing type of book on jazz. Next we have another book that I've mentioned in my Nonfiction November TBR. This is For the Love of Music, A Conductor's Guide to the Art of Listening by John Mauceri, the same John Mauceri I mentioned for Maestros and Their Music. This one he talks specifically about how to listen to classical music, so basically what to listen for. Since I enjoyed his other book, I was really interested in reading this one as well. The last one is probably the one that I am most excited to read of these ones, and it is The Lost Pianos of Siberia by Sophy Roberts. So basically it's a history of the pianos in Siberia, and I'm assuming some talk about piano playing and pianists as well. So those are all of the books that I wanted to talk about for this nonfiction on music video. Let me know if you've read any of these books. I would love to chat about them, if any of the ones that I have read or any of the ones that I want to read. If you have any recommendations for me, I would love to hear about them. I am particularly, like you probably mentioned, that you probably noticed, I am particularly interested in reading about the instrument making, classical music, and jazz, but also generally about music in a more broad way, like the one on the psychology and neuroscience combined with music. So if you have any recommendations, definitely let me know. That was all I wanted to say. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!